The truth behind why Rule of Rose is the most expensive PlayStation 2 game on the planet. Rule of Rose is a horror game, not so much in the regular jump scare nature, more like an adventure game with a dark twist, following a 19-year-old woman named Jennifer having a flashback into her horrific childhood trauma of being the lone survivor of a tragic airship accident in which her parents died, being sent away to an orphanage, and inevitably being kidnapped by a cult to do their bidding. This horror survival game can range from $250 to $25,000. No, not nearly as expensive as Reddit leads you to believe. Highest graded price online has just been $3,000. The average price for a new copy of Rule of Rose is $1,200. Don't get me started on the price of a loose disc. How long does it take to beat the game? Is this being nostalgic, or is Rule of Rose that good of a game to justify this outrageous price tag? The reviews weren't even that great, considering GameSpot gave it a 6, IGN with a 4.9 out of 10, and Games Radar only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Rule of Rose was developed by Punchline Studios and only had an initial print of around 10 to 20,000 copies. So it's only expensive because it didn't have many copies produced. Yes, and because of who Punchline Studios paired up with. Rule of Rose was developed in cooperation with Shirogummi, a popular animation studio in Japan. If you haven't heard of Shirogummi, they have animated many popular TV shows and movies, such as Dragon Quest, Doraemon, and amongst many more. Was this Punchline's first game? Maybe a reason for a spike in the price? Nope. Punchline Studios' first game was called Chulip, a game in which you kiss people at the lowest point of their lives to make them feel happy. And a Sony rep did the research and decided, yeah, the creators of that kissing game, they bleed horror. I get it, it was 2005 and Resident Evil 4 was a huge success, sold 2.3 million copies. Sony needed another horror game in development ASAP. Why choose to fund Punchline Studios to make a horror game? Sony wanted a horror game that they could be released internationally. Instead, they got the literal opposite. Well, I think even the Sony reps were surprised with the end results. It came from Punchline's first game in the horror scene. They probably thought it would be a little more tame, and definitely an easy international release, since Sony refused to publish Rule of Rose in the West, deeming the game wasn't in sync with their corporate image and wanted the game to be tamer, which made everyone question if Sony stepped away, how horrid is this game? Rule of Rose being riddled with controversy and misinformation from day one, the media claiming the game's only purpose is to rape, beat up, and kill a little girl, which according to the developers, the main theme is really about trust and loyalty, but the controversy was enough to bury it. Eventually, Atlas and 505 Games stepped in and take over the publishing rights in Europe and America shortly after. 505 Games and Red Ant Enterprises cancelled their release of Rule of Rose in Australia and New Zealand due to not submitting to the Australian Classification Board for approval. So I don't know whether this is incompetency or just too much controversy that both companies deemed it unnecessary. We'll never know. Rule of Rose was banned in the UK, and even the mayor of Italy going as far as saying this game must not enter Italian homes, had France officials creating amendments to ban Rule of Rose, change video game ratings to be harsher for the futures of gaming. Rule of Rose was given an ESRB rating of mature 17+, and a PEGI rating of 16+. Franco Frattini attacked the game, saying that it contained obscene cruelty and brutality. He also called for changes to the PEGI rating system. 505 Games goes as far as inviting politicians and journalists to judge Rule of Rose for themselves with a hands-on test. 505 Games decides to not release Rule of Rose to Europe due to all of the controversy. Do you blame the media and politicians for spreading misinformation about Rule of Rose? If anyone is to blame for the high price tag of Rule of Rose, shouldn't the blame be on Sony for not continuing to publish Rule of Rose internationally? Or do you blame how badly 505 Games and Atlas did as a small publisher? Or even the PEGI rating of 16+, deeming that it's a bit too inappropriate? Was the ESRB mature 18+ rating more fitting for a story like this? Thanks for watching Rule of Rose Deep Dive. If you like this and have any other games I should do a deep dive on, be sure to comment down below. Thank you.